One.
You got it? Good. Will you give us a sign when we take action?
They're good. They're on.
Oh, it's okay.
You can crop it later.
Hi, my name is Haley. I'm Alyssa. I'm Jamie.
I'm Jackie.
I'm Leanne.
And I'm Katie.
And our topic is on-campus study spaces.
So first I'm going to start talking about our research question. So our research focused on student behavior and what makes up a good study space. So one of the first things we looked at what students' opinions are on campus about study spaces. We wanted to know what they like, why they study in certain spaces over another. We also wanted to know if there was a need for additional study spaces on campus, if there was interest for additional study spaces, and if there was a need to renovate current study spaces that are here. We also wanted to know where students are studying so we can understand why they study in those spaces, if it makes it better than certain study spaces. We understand that analyzing past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, so that's why we focused on some of these questions. So we had a lot of questions going into this, but after meeting with our client, we kind of narrowed it down to 3 basic areas that we wanted to touch on. So the first one being, what kind of furniture do students want to see? All of these 3 questions our client laid out to us as the 3 main things that they really want to understand. So looking at furniture, they wanted to know if students prefer soft seating over hard seating. So soft seating, for example, would be those cushioned booth seatings up in the 3rd floor. Hard seating would be wooden chairs. So they wanted to know what students prefer to have in a study space. They also wanted to know what students preferred when it came to a classroom layout. So do students just use classrooms for their typical 1045 class, or do students use study rooms to study after hours? And that really helps them understand how to organize the room. So they wanted to know where to place the chairs, where to place the tables based on how students use the room. Lastly, they wanted us to look at the availability. So do students use 24-hour spaces? Do they like 24-hour spaces? Do they want more of them? One of the big things they wanted to know is the students' thoughts on the KIC 3rd floor since it is so new, and also the possibility of potentially turning that into a 24-hour space.
So for the methods, we started with an observational study, then went to our questionnaire. So each of us went to a different study location on campus, and we stayed there for a 30-minute time period, and we saw where they were studying, what time of day it was, and if they were working alone or in groups, and also if they were using computers or they were using books. And then this was exploratory research for our preliminary test utilization of these study spaces. So then for our questionnaire, after doing the observational study, this helped us to create our questionnaire. We had 4 main categories, which was the study behavior, the study space components, the demographics, and then feedback. So for the study behavior, we looked at the location, time, and alone versus group. So for location, our first question was in the most preferred where to study. So of our study locations on campus, what was their most preferred to least preferred? And then we also looked at where in the last week that they have studied. And then the time was morning, evening, or night. And then we looked at alone versus groups. As far as the study space components, Jackie kind of touched on this. This was their importance that they ranked it from strongly disagree to disagree. And then it was the ability to reserve, the power outlets, cushion seating, privacy, quiet, the whiteboards, and also food and beverage. So they ranked this on if it was important to them or not. Third was the demographics, which we did class rank in their majors. And then 4th was any additional feedback that they had about study spaces on campus.
So breaking down our research, we went into our data analysis portion, and from our research we have several recommendations that we would like to make. So I'm going to go through the first recommendation, which would be smaller study spaces on campus. So throughout our survey, we found that 78% of students have studied in their personal room in a typical academic week. Our survey did go out on November 26th, so it was a typical academic week. It wasn't out during finals week. And we did survey the entire population. We sent it out through the student database. So each student on campus had a known and equal opportunity of being involved. So through this, we also found that 95% of student respondents say that quiet space is important to them as a study space component. 90% of students say that privacy is important to them. And 64% of students say that they prefer to study alone. So of the remaining 36% of students who say they prefer to study in groups, 75% of those students study with only 1 to 3 people. So based on these findings, we recommend implementing smaller group study spaces that are meant to accommodate 1 to 3 people, rather than the larger spaces meant to accommodate 4 to 8 people. So as we all know, being students here, nothing is worse than walking past the study room and seeing only one person in there. So that's kind of frowned upon, but students really want that quiet and private space to study in. They see that as their optimal study space. So therefore, we think that a variety of study spaces on campus will help accommodate specific student needs. So part of our survey, as Alyssa mentioned, was an additional feedback and comment section, and this was an open response. And through this section, we received numerous comments asking for smaller and solo study spaces. So we believe that based off of our findings and off of direct student feedback, that these smaller study spaces would be used on campus and would better our study space environment.
Our next recommendation is regarding a variety of study locations on campus. So we found that 73% of students reported that distance from living location to study spaces is important to them. So obviously students are seeing value in study spaces that are closer to home. So with that being said, we would recommend adding smaller study spaces to 3 main locations on campus: HPCC, upperclassmen housing, and the MAC. So on this slide here in orange, you can see that these are some of the main study locations right now. So EBB/TNH, KIC, and Chapman Hall. So from our survey, we found that these were some of the main study locations. As you can see, this is only in one spot of campus, so they're all kind of clustered within a 3-minute walk radius. So we would recommend adding to those 3 different locations to kind of add a variety of areas to the campus for people to study. So down here in the blue, you can see that we highlighted the map. So we would like to add additional study spaces in the map, mainly to accommodate for students living in the old townhouses. So since students want study spaces closer to home, this would provide closer study spaces to them. In the yellow highlighted is HPCC. This would provide additional study spaces to students that live in Beaker Ross, Shields, and even McMaster. This study space is especially unique because there is the B&B CAF in there, so it also provides another food area for students to study within there. In the green is Giese for performing arts. This one's really unique because it provides a lot of additional study spaces to students living in the new townhouses, sorority and fraternity houses, along with apartments. So obviously these 3 locations add additional study spaces to students who live near them, but it also provides an option for students living off campus and commuter students to study in locations that aren't in the middle of campus. Another question that our client had asked us was if students are studying in residence hall lounges. So we found that actually only 18% of students are studying in a res hall lounge. So at first you would think, well, the closest place for students to study to their home is the residence hall lounge. But since that percent was so low, we didn't include it in one of our 3 recommended locations. But that is research that we would recommend to our client or anyone else to do further research on, because since there was an interest in having study locations closer to home, it could be interesting to understand further research as, you know, if the residence hall lounges were renovated, would students prefer to have it in that area? So although we had a lower percent, we do recommend further research in that area to see if that's a potential for a variety of study spaces.
Another recommendation we have is the continued use of cushioned seating in study spaces. So out of our student respondents, 78% either agree or strongly agree to the importance of cushioned seating in a study space. We attribute this to students having long study sessions, and they want to have a comfortable environment to study in. So this proves that cushioned seating is a must-have. Out of the most studied places on campus, the KIC third floor, which was 69% of students, and KIC 24-hour, 53% of students. These 2 locations do have cushioned seating. So it's recommended that we will continue to add cushioned seating to all study areas to make students more comfortable.
After meeting with Wayne Lewis, we also had, we got a little bit of insider information from him that they have plans to renovate the basement of KIC, which is currently the computer science area and has kind of the 60s diner feel with it. So he was very interested to see should they go along with renovating that space. So we found that within a typical week, about 15% of students studied there, which was dramatically higher than we thought, given the fact that it was a small area. And then also we found that 91% of students studied somewhere in KIC, and this includes the DWalk, the 24-hour area, KIC third floor, as well as the classrooms in KIC. So we think that if they continue with reservations in the KIC, the students will use it. Utilization for areas in the KIC has dramatically been going up, and so we think that if they build it, the students will come and definitely utilize it. So we do recommend that they continue on with their renovations of that area.
And our final recommendation has to do with implementing an additional 24-hour area space. So as you can see through the statistics stated, 85% of students would be interested in seeing an additional 24-hour area, where only 2% would not. So this kind of just shows how important we kind of value that as students. And then as well as a lot of the other recommendations, there were also a lot of additional feedback. So a lot of students were coming in saying, yeah, we want this, even after they were asked a question. And out of the students we surveyed 70 to 80% studying in the evening or later, proving that an additional 24-hour area space would be a good thing. And then on top of that, regarding a location, we decided that the KIC third floor would be the best location for this. So 70%, around 69-70% studied in the KIC third floor location in a typical academic week. And then we actually found a significance in our data. So when we ran the SPSS report, we found a 0.001 significance in students who were studying in the 24-hour, or were interested in the 24-hour area. They were studying on the third floor, so this would be the best location for that.
So we talked a lot about the additional comments section. This was like the last section of our survey, and I just wanted to put into like a visual for you guys what a lot of the comments were. So our biggest comment, obviously as you can see by the size, was to have another 24-hour area. We had 23% of comments say that they wanted a 24-hour area. We had 52 comments out of 176 surveys, so a good portion of our surveys liked to have additional comments, and they took the time to say that they wanted an additional 24-hour area, even though we asked questions about it. So they had very strong feelings towards this, as well as 19% of the comments said they wanted a solo study room, and then 17% said that they wanted more study rooms for students on campus. So those are the big three things that were mentioned in our comments. We also had some other comments about some people wanted to have more reservations, some people didn't like the reservations. Those were pretty even. A lot of people suggested more pods and whiteboards. A lot of people said location closer to my house, as well as quiet areas, and some people even wanted vending. So we did a lot of our survey based off of this information from the students, but we did have a significant number of students who did take extra time to give us their feedback.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Any questions from your fellow peers? Did you guys take the survey? How many people took the survey? Dun, dun, dun. Okay. Good job, guys. Thank you.
Oh, it died.
It's okay.
It was like flashing.
Oh yeah.
I was like, what?